Good morning. This confirmation hearing conducted by the Committee on Economic Development, Agriculture, Maritime Transportation, Power and Energy Utilities and Emergency Response is now called to order at 9:02 a.m. Notice of the hearing was disseminated to all local media outlets via electronic mail on October 7th of 2019, with a second notice provided on October 12th of 2019. Notice of the hearing was also made known on the Guam Legislature's website. The committee will hear testimony on the appointments of Mr. David J. John and Mr. George Chu as members of the Board of Directors for the Guam Economic Development Authority. And before I call the appointees forward to the panel, I'd like to invite anyone who's interested in testifying on the matter to please sign up with my staff over there in the corner. I'd like to recognize Senator Therese Terlahi. Thank you for joining us this morning. And with that, I'd like to begin also by calling up those who have signed up to testify, beginning with forgive me if I can't read this correct. Is this a Mendiola from Gita? Oh, Mel Mendiola. I apologize. I couldn't see the first name. And anyone else who is here to testify on behalf of the appointees this morning? If not, we'll go ahead and begin with Ms. Melanie Mendiola.
So should I give both testimony for both Chairman John and George Chu? Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Hafade and good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Melanie Mendiola, and I'm the CEO Administrator of the Guam Economic Development Authority. I'm submitting this testimony in support of confirmation of Mr. David John as member of the Board of Directors for the Guam Economic Development Authority, as I believe Chairman John has already established himself as a capable member and leader over his past tenure on the board. Chairman John's background and work within the realm of finance and economics is widely known within our community. This very body has even sought Mr. John's advice and perspectives over countless business and economic issues that have affected our island over the years, specifically in areas of retirement and investments. I've worked with Chairman John for approximately 2 years, but have known him by reputation since I moved home in 2005 through the work of his company, ASC. He's an example of an excellent corporate citizen. He hires local from our university. He promotes from within and gives back. There's not a 5K or golf tournament in town where you don't see an ASC banner. How will the Board of Directors of the Guam Economic Development Authority look different under the leadership of Chairman John? I think you'll see many changes that have already taken place in the last 10 months. Chairman John set the course for a subcommittee structure so that our board members could lead and be actively engaged in the many important economic development initiatives of our island, as well as ongoing needs of a Government of Guam agency. Currently, every board meeting includes reports from standing as well as ad hoc committees, and this has resulted in greater accountability from GITA staff, engagement for our board members, and information sharing with the public. Chairman John recognized early on that our budget would be a challenge in fiscal year 2019. He instilled a sense of urgency for us to close these gaps. It was under his leadership that we revived discussion with AT&T after years of this particular lease owned by the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission was passed from one office to the next. This resulted in millions of back rent being collected, positively impacting our P&L and, more importantly, the P&L of the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. Additionally, he gave me the autonomy to figure out how to maximize our revenue given our current resource constraints. And this has included going after millions of dollars in U.S. Economic Development Administration grants, which we hope will convert to funding for the governor's initiatives this coming fiscal year. He's advocated strongly for the administration and the legislature to understand the limitations of our funding sources and work with us to expand our funding sources. And I believe that this is what Chairman John will continue to do in the next phase of his leadership at GITA. It was under Chairman John's leadership that we've given out a greater proportion of our community contributions to community organizations, most especially those involved in sustainability and incubating new businesses. In fiscal year 2020, we are launching our Community Contribution Grant Program, a program to promote our community contributions to a wider audience and provide a greater level of transparency in the application, award, and monitoring process. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, it is our most fervent hope that y legislatura en Guahan will confirm Chairman David John at the soonest possible time for the benefit of our agency and our community. Si Diyos masi.
Thank you. I'd like to also recognize Senator Tello Tidegui. Thank you for joining us. And as well as Madam Speaker Tina Muñoz-Barnes. Thank you for joining us as well this morning. Please continue.
Okay, and so this next testimony is for Board Member Chu, George Chu. Day, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I'm submitting this testimony in full support to renew the confirmation of Mr. George Chu as a member of the Board of Directors of the Guam Economic Development Authority. From his days as an islander at JFK and a Triton at the University of Guam to his role today as the Executive Vice President of TAN Holdings, Director Chu is a homegrown documentary of success through hard work, persistence, and determination. Director Chu's background throughout his entire professional career is lined with leadership roles over numerous entities within the business communities of both Guam and the CNMI, and community service not only through board membership at GIDA, but also as a leader in the Chinese Chamber of Commerce, the University of Guam Endowment Foundation, and countless other organizations. I've worked with Director Chu for about 2 years, about the same as Chairman John. He is no nonsense, straight to the point, and quick to seek resolution during board deliberation. This is an invaluable contribution to a working board, most especially when there are numerous items to get through on any given meeting agenda. He stimulates thoughtful discussion, giving GIDA management direction, advice, and counsel. Director Chu was the first committee chair for our Investments and Finance Committee, a role revived in this administration. And specific to Governor Leonguerau's desire to diversify local industries, Director Chu volunteered to serve as the chair for the Telecommunications Committee and is an advisor in our aquaculture task force, as he currently runs an aquaculture operation not on Guam. As we get deeper into this industry, I know that he will be available with good advice and advocacy when needed. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, it is our most fervent hope that y legislatura en Guahan will confirm Director George Chu at the soonest possible time for the benefit of our agency and our community. Si Diyos masi, and thank you for this opportunity to provide our testimonies of support. And that's what I have for both.
Thank you. All right, at this time, I'd like to call up Mr. David John.
Good morning, Chairman Ridgell and members of the 35th Guam Legislature. Thanks for taking the time for me this morning. I'll make sure my comments are brief. My name is David John. I'm current chairman of the Guam Economic Development Authority. I've been a board member of GIDA since the beginning of the Calvo administration. I'm honored that Governor Leonguerau has confidence to ask me to continue in my role. I hope you'll find me an acceptable candidate and to continue for my third term. In my professional life, I'm president of ASC Trust LLC. ASC is a leader of retirement administration in Micronesia, serving over 30,000 participants and $800 million in assets. I'm also an active member of the University of Guam Endowment Fund Board and was the recent chairman of the Red Cross Red Ball this year. Most importantly, I'm husband of Teresa Adajan, who's sitting behind me. We have 2 young sons. Both are off island at university right now. If approved, I would like to continue my work to strengthen the qualifying certificate program by continuously moving from the old blanket QC program to an industry-specific program, similar to what we did with the hotel special QC program. We're currently working on a second program right now for health insurance. Additionally, we've begun to look at how we can optimize the opportunities for the cable activity that's coming through Guam through the idea of data farms and 5G services. In addition to the qualifying certificate, I'd like to work with this body to strengthen our revenue source for the agency. We have some ideas. We'll work with you and come to you over the next few months. But Mel and her team has been working diligently to find stronger revenue sources than what is currently on the table. Our team has some ideas. I'm sorry, with that, we'll be bringing it to you. As I said, I'd like to make my comments short so you can ask me questions and can address anything that's on your mind. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'd actually like to go ahead and call up Mr. George Chu as well. Morning, Mr. Chu. Go ahead and please, you can present your statement.
Good morning, Senator Ridgell. Good morning, Speaker Tina Maria Barnes, Senators Tello Tadagui, and Senator Therese Terali. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity this morning to come before the Legislative Confirmation Committee. I keep my remarks even shorter than David John's. I've also been on the board of GITA for the past 8 years, together with David John. Again, I'd like to thank Governor Lou Leongaro for having the confidence to ask me to stay on board. I think our head of GITA there behind us, Melanie, pretty much stated everything in her support testimony. I pretty much grew up on Guam. My daughter was born, raised here in Guam, and went off to school. I consider Guam my home. It's my pleasure to try to serve at the pleasure of the legislature and the governor. All I try to do really is to do what I think is best for Guam, because Guam is my home and I want it to be a better place. So that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chu. And now I'd like to afford the opportunity to my colleagues to ask any questions they may have, beginning with Speaker Tina Muñoz Barnes.
Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity. No questions in particular. I know both Mr. John and Mr. Chu. I just want to say thank you for your efforts in continuing to be a part of the board with recommendation from the executive president or director, Melanie. I want to say thank you for having GITA. You and your deputy are here in their support. I want to say thank you for that. I also see some of the supervisors here or the team from GITA here in the efforts of supporting these two nominees. I want to thank the governor, the Magahaga, for seeing the vision that you guys have had in the last 2 terms, and her wanting to continue that speaks volumes of wanting to keep both you, Mr. John, and you, Mr. Chu, here. And you got my support. I just want to note, maybe ask the both of you just one simple question as it relates to investments and opportunities, and where do you see yourselves, both of you, doing more or innovative ideas to continue to promote Guam, whether it be through the cruise industry, whether it be looking for new industries. I know earlier they talk about aquaculture, and I'm hoping that that can also be a part of the forefront. But where do you see Guam, envision Guam to be within the next term to grow our economy?
I'll go first because I'm pretty sure Chairman John will have a lot more to add than I do. One area that our company is always looking at is to try to develop and promote Guam. So one of the first things that we've done in this new administration is that I'm very happy to announce that tomorrow will be a really flagship day for our company. We've taken, I don't know how many years ago we took over the old Daiichi Hotel in Tumon, and when Daiichi went bankrupt in Japan, we took it over and we then converted it into the Fiesta Guam Resort. Effective tomorrow, I'm really pleased that we've been working really hard to find a way to continue to promote the island of Guam economically, and we have signed an agreement, and effective tomorrow, Intercontinental Hotel Group will take over the management of the hotel. The board of our company has decided to make a significant investment to upgrade the property, and it will be rebranded as an international brand to basically add to the attractiveness of Guam. So we're thinking that this is one area of economic growth that I think is something that we need. We want to have our tourists given a reason to come back, and I think having an international brand with significant influence in China, in Japan, and Korea, our key source markets for tourism in Guam, is a great opportunity, not only for our company, but for Guam itself. But that's just talking from our company point of view. But from Gita's point of view, I think for the past 8 years, I've always stressed that we need to help the local small business people. Okay, I think that's one area that we've been looking at. We have a loan fund that I think that we should be developing a little bit more to help the people of Guam to start up their business. We have a lot of people who have great ideas, great startup opportunities, but have difficulty in accumulating enough capital to get their business up and running. And in today's day of technology, it doesn't take a lot. It just takes a great idea, and with all the social media available, I think if Gita could be in a position to be a little bit more aggressive in reaching out to these people and getting to come in, probably reducing maybe some of the paperwork involved. I think one of the hiccups that we had was having the need to get 3 rejection letters from the local banks. We're hoping there's some way to set up a program where that wouldn't be required, so you didn't have to go around and fill out 3 applications and get 3 rejections, and just make it a little bit easier to come to Gita. And for us, we definitely have the funding available and to provide the seed money for these ideas, and I think this is something that we really should be emphasizing over the next term. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chu. Mr. John?
Okay, there we go. In concurrence with Director Chu, regarding tourism would be the first one. As we know, the Sabaki Tower is being built right now, and so we have some increased inventory that's going to be coming online there. In the tourism area, which is the first one, and that's our main industry, private sector industry, the headwinds that we're encountering right now have to do with the H-2B issues and the construction costs. So I think one of the things we need to do from the island's perspective, not just from hotels, but also from housing, is to get the H-2B issue resolved. I mean, just full frontal on that one, have everybody involved from agency level, administration, the front office, the legislature, and the delegate, because without that, it's going to be very difficult to continue growing that sector. I believe we have 3 hotels that are lined up and very interested in moving forward, but they don't have the construction personnel to move that forward. So we're working with what we can do on the H-2B issue. The second piece, which is a little bit more intermediate term, is communications. As you know, we have 13 major cables now passing through Guam, and there's several more that are being looked at for investment over the next few years. Guam is just such a unique thing, and it provides an opportunity for us, specifically around data servicing, data storage, data farms, getting those things in place. The roadblock there is our utility costs are so high. So trying to find ways that we can encourage the data just not to pass through, but to drop off and be stored here could be a big opportunity for the island. Once you get that data stored here, there could be all kinds of small industries that could spin off from that. And that, if you look at the Costa Rica model on the, as far as how they developed apps over the last 15 years, we could spin off of something like that, where you'd have Asian companies that want to have their proprietary information in Asia, but still nearby. And that's a big thing. The latency piece is huge when it comes to these things, especially as we move into 5G. having your data close to your source is very important. So having it here in Guam could provide big opportunities for the island. And also, if we could parlay the press that we've gotten over the last few years. You know, if it used to be you'd talk to somebody in the States, maybe you'd say I'm from Guam, and you'd have to explain where it is. Now, there's some good things that have come up through here, and some not so good things, but our name's been out there more. And having companies and organizations realize where we are and how close to Asia we are, there is an opportunity that has been talked about for a long time, and that's getting more companies to base here to operate into Asia. And so I think that if we could get more air coverage into Southeast Asia, that could be an opportunity. So over the long run, trying to find opportunities to link Southeast Asia up to Guam could provide an opportunity there. But from our end of it, we want to focus on H-2Bs immediately, and we've been continually trying to support that effort because if we don't get the workers, we're not going to get the hotels. And more importantly, I think if we don't get it going, we're not going to have the housing, and that's going to become a huge issue. Our economy's flat. I mean, we've got tourism at its almost all-time high. We have the military buildup started, and we're flat. And that's just not right. And it has to do with we're not getting the private sector development because we don't have the workers. So whatever we can do to move that one along is important. And then on the telecommunications, the second piece we're working on right now. Sorry, long-winded answer.
No, that's
Okay.
definitely fine. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Mr. Chair, I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to inquire with these two gentlemen, but more importantly, to say that I support both of them. I see family here, and I just want to make sure that you know that they can continue their work.
Thank you,
got my
Madam
support,
Speaker.
both of you.
Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
you,
And
Speaker.
Senator Chalahi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Thank
Morning.
you for your testimony and your willingness to serve again on the GITA board, and for all of you who submitted testimony, Melanie. I just had a couple questions. So this is, in January, they announced GITA's new priorities to include some of the things that you've discussed, the H-2B visa issue, refining the qualifying certificate program, and exploring agriculture as a means for economic revenue. I guess in regards to the H-2B visa, what is GITA's role? What do you see as GITA's role in helping to resolve that issue?
Supporting the administration with data, as well as going on discussions when we do go off island. There's a limited role we can play, but whatever we can support the administration with in that area. But it's been more just providing the data for the administration, and we've gone on a couple of we've accompanied the administration on a couple of trips to talk with people within the role. One was in the Philippines recently. I don't know if you were familiar with what happened regarding the Philippine workers. But at first, the federal government wasn't, I forget what agency, but they weren't going to allow the Philippine workers to come on at all. And then they allowed for them to come on to the base, which provided the opening. But Guam historically has been removed from one piece of the Philippine rules when it comes to overseas workers. When you go into an agreement with the Philippine government to provide overseas workers for your country, one of the components that comes into the wage structure is the sponsoring company is supposed to pick up housing and food. And that's because in a lot of these countries, they're paid dirt wages. But in Guam, the average worker that comes over, I think, if I'm not misspeaking, gets paid $16.50 an hour, which from a Philippine standard is a huge dollar amount. So the Philippine government has signed off to not require Guam to follow the additional housing and food allowance, because if a company had to do that for the Philippine workers, they'd also have to do that for the local workers, which would just create an inflationary effect. And so we went and met with the head of the overseas workers and the Secretary of Labor in the Philippines to get that resolved. And so we were able to do that. So that's one of the success stories. But there is a limited role in what we can do from our role. But we're trying to continue to advocate for it, make sure it's on the top of everybody's radar. And I know we get kind of caught up in our own functionalities every day, but without getting those workers in, we could be in some tough times when it comes to housing and inflationary pressures for the island over the next few years.
Of course, yes. So, yeah, that's why I'm curious what
Yeah.
GIDA's role can be in that regard. Mr. Chu, did you have anything to add on that in that regard?
No, I don't. I think Chairman John has pretty much summed up GIDA's position with regards to H2.
All right. In regards to the cables, and I know that you've talked about the increased investment that we can attract if we can store data here and decrease utility costs, but what type of income is Guam receiving from the cables themselves, from the cables being able to come through here? Is there any?
Right now it's leases, right? Because I mean, it comes down to
Gee.
what's being used on the island. So you're coming across the reef and you're coming down, and most of the cable landing stations are on government land. For example, the AT&T one we just settled on. What was the dollar amount on that? The lease? 4.9 million. So it has to do with lease payments mostly right now.
So just the landings, the
Yeah.
land landing areas.
And then as a community where we benefit is the speed. I mean, the
Right, of
lightning, I mean,
course.
this provides opportunities for everything. My business right now, for example, we used to have to host all our servers here, which is it's costly to, because you're not, what am I trying to say? When you're upgrading the components of it, you're so far away from the States. You're working with what am I trying to say? It's a very difficult process from a speed wise, right? And so we had to put certain things in the office from a hardware standpoint that just was not very efficient in today's world. We're in a cloud-based environment, and there's a lot of other industries here that do the similar things, from the hotels to the banks. And so the ability to have the speed to do that kind of work is a huge benefit. So right now the community benefits from leases and from the speed that's there. And then there are some work that's done to actually maintain the landing stations themselves. But where we can parlay it and where we should be focusing on is how do we get the companies that are doing these works to base additional functions of their operation here. And that's what we're trying to explore.
Right, the data, right?
Yeah,
okay,
data.
what about permits? Are there required permits for the cables themselves in the ocean?
Oh, it's a big process.
Who's
it's
getting
not
the
impeded,
permit
but
fees? Which government gets the permit fees for those?
I think it would be, is it Guam EPA? Because they're coming across the reef. That's the part, from a permit standpoint, that's the critical part, making sure that the reef isn't being damaged. But once it's in, then it's a pipe underground,
So you're
right?
saying it's Guam EPA?
I think so. I want to say that, but if we could confirm
right.
it.
Can I just ask the difference between, I mean, I know your loan fund programs, that's the longest program I'm familiar with at GIDA, but the new one that you're going to launch is for community funds from QCs, is that correct? So for example, GRMC, when they give their community funds, they had been advocating that those be used for health purposes, but now these funds will be allocated according to the board's this new grant program?
We would take into consideration the company that's making the contributions request, right? But at the end of the day, yeah, it would be, and it always has been GIDA's role. It has been to last legislature. I don't know if you remember, but last legislature took that community contribution
Yes.
away from us, which were
We put it to, I think, Medicaid.
healthy
and-
future. Yeah, no, good stuff. No, good stuff.
and,
Yes, but
CPS
yeah.
at that time, yes.
no question there.
All right. What about, I wanted to ask you about this, because you're going to be renewed on the board, right? What is your position on this lawsuit, Pure Stone versus GIDA and Chamorro Land Trust? Because they canceled the RFP. I just want to know if we're,
Which is this one?
I know it's still in litigation, but I just want to
Still in litigation. Yeah.
ensure the board members are not intending to settle that or something like that, and then,
We're not, it's still in litigation, but we're not, there's nothing that's been discussed.
your position is the same.
Yeah,
The board
nothing.
took a position, and so they're fighting this in a lawsuit, right?
Yes,
Oh,
I
okay.
believe so.
All right.
Anything else we can add? No.
And the Hakubotan lease, that building, that lease now, they said, is it still being leased to GPD? Did that go through? Part of it?
Yeah, it's just, we tried to buy that building last year, if you
Yes.
recall.
So they were behind in payments?
Yeah, and they
then
caught
you
up.
tried to buy it?
Yeah, we tried to
Okay.
buy it, and then they came in and got caught up with all of their payments, so it's moved forward. But they're at market rates, I believe. Yeah, one of the things we've been really trying to on the real estate side of things, a couple of things there is, one, each time someone comes to us with an attempt to change what's going on with the leases, we try to bring it up to market rates, and the goal is to get it within market rates within 10 years. Because under the lease, there's a lot of things that are under market rates. So it's kind of hard to bring it up to, right away. But that's our goal: is to if they're going to ask for something from us, then we're going to try to get the lease into market rates. And so we've been trying to do that. It stopped a couple projects because they said, oh no, we just want, we only want it if it's at this dollar. If it's going to be here, we're not going to do it. But we've been adamant. I know both Director Chu and I have both focused on making sure that any new arrangements we go into are at market rates. And secondly, on the real estate, if you don't mind me just taking this opportunity here, one of the things that's really stopping us from developing a strong land portfolio is the 5-year rule. I know, Senator Terlahi, you worked at. I'm sorry, Senator Tidegree, I was looking straight at is working at trying to get it from 5 to 10 years. But even that 10 years, if you're gonna get land and try to develop anything, you're not gonna get a bank loan for 10 years. And so it still puts a lot of limitations on what we can do. So we're trying to figure out how we could work with the legislature to solve a long-term problem. And what we're gonna be bringing to you is the idea that instead of going out and putting out something for lease and then coming back to the legislature, we'd like to come to you beforehand and try to enter into a longer-term lease with conditions. Come with a group of properties or a bigger property and say, hey, this is our goal for this property. We would like to develop something to do with medical or something to do with maybe it's just retail or housing or whatever it is. Provide you with what the market rates or the conditions would be and get your approval beforehand, and then once you've blessed it, let us go out and do our job. And in the condition to make sure we'd continue to do that is we'd have to come to you for each block. So if we weren't doing our job, you just wouldn't have to approve the next one, or you'd know where to clamp down on. But I think that would allow us to get out there and actively get more involved with the leases. Because when you go to someone right now and you say, yeah, we got this great piece of land, lease it from us, we'll draw into the lease, and then we have to go down to the legislature. And private companies don't, why would I want to go to the legislature? I just try to lease some land. So and then it kind of gets delayed. We had one project at the, what was the printing? Star Press building behind Gita, and we had it agreed to, and it just got pushed back because we just couldn't get the terms or couldn't get things pushed through on the legislative level, and it just disappeared. And so we would like to reverse it, and not to remove the legislature's role in this at all, but to bring it into the front side of things so that we could bring it to you first, work with you on the conditions, and then once we got approved on what the limitations would be, then we would be able to actively go out and act as the government's negotiator in the deal.
The real property leases is what funds that loan fund program, is that correct?
Yes.
And so what is your collections rate? I mean, are we up to date with collections, or are there other cases such as the former Hakubotan case?
I don't think we're behind anything else, are we? Yeah, pretty much everybody's current. We haven't had any major issues there, and we haven't had any major issues on the loan side of things because we haven't done much lending since the financial crisis. When the financial crisis occurred, the U.S. Treasury stepped up and they started backstopping the loans at the banks. So they would go into the banks and actively back the loans for the lender, or for the borrower, sorry, so that more loans became palatable on a bank lending level. And so we haven't had, to Director Chu's point, we haven't had the three strikes in coming to see us very often lately.
And he says that the funding is available, though, so that's great to hear, and that
Yep.
that program will be encouraged, I guess.
Yeah.
So this is my last question. Is it your understanding that there's a moratorium right now on QCs? Is that still in place?
We need to come to you before we issue a QC, right? So we go through the whole thing, and we think that's our inorganic, but we're working on figuring out where that's at. But we're holding off on things because people, we're holding off on bringing. We've had a couple that are interested, but they're saying we don't necessarily want to come down and open up our company finances. We've done that in the QC setting. Making everything public is maybe not so intriguing. How should I say it? So yeah, we'd like to get back to a normal standing with you so that we can provide the QC support. That being said, we're not out. We've had this discussion before. We're not out trying to find ways to give taxpayers money away. It's for deals that are going to benefit the community, but we're not out trying to find ways to do this, right? We're trying to find the right fit for things. The hotel piece of it is not being blocked by anybody other than the workers. If we had the workers, we would be with you, trying to get things passed through. Right now it's not the most efficient manner, but there's not like we have a whole bunch stacked up and waiting to go. But we would like to work with you to have that removed.
All right, well, thank you both again for your service and continued interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Chalahi. Senator Titagwe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. And those in Gita, my former colleagues, good to see you all. And, most of my colleagues have asked most of the questions I had with regarding a few things. But I did want to touch on going back to the cables. You know that I have a bill that most likely will become on the session agenda this October for the fiber optic cables task force. And some of the questions that was asked by my good colleague here, Terlahi, about who gets the permits. And there are a lot of questions actually that are unanswered. Incentives, definitely they're there. The possibility of economic growth is there. However, we have to be very cautious moving forward on something like this because even though we've been taken advantage of for so many years, being the second largest area of fiber optic cables coming through the Pacific, we are the second. We have to ensure that we also protect our borders as well. And I actually, just FYI, I'm glad you're here, Director, that I have a call with FCC on October 16th at 8 a.m. in the morning with FCC. They oversee the fiber optic cables that go into the United States. So we're finally going to set a meeting. I didn't have a chance to meet with them in DC. But my concern, too, is I know, David John, I met with you months ago when I put out this bill and talked to you about it. And as we move forward to discuss more Gita's role, because they will be the head of the task force, the chairman of the task force, do you see any conflict of interest considering that you are part owner of GTA in being involved in this at Gita, and how do you guys address conflict of interest?
Yeah, I'm not going to be involved with it. That's why I told you up front with that. We run into conflicts from time to time, but when we do, we certainly step back. And I made that very upfront of my role with GTA and our landing station. So I'm not going to be involved with it at all. That doesn't mean I don't think I should be an advocate of it, but I just need to make sure that that's common knowledge for certain. But it's to that point though, this is still an opportunity that that could really be a game changer for Guam if done correctly.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree. That's why this task
That's why I
force.
made that's why I made the
And-
investment at GTA. Yeah.
And after that meeting, I greatly appreciate, when you started looking into what was owed to Gita with regards to the AT&T owing the $4.9 million that actually it started off way back 3 months ago. So hopefully we can get this task force going and get more involved. How about you, George? What happens when there's a conflict of interest? Have you been in situations where there has been a conflict of interest where you had to step aside?
I think if there's anybody on the board of GITA that has conflicts, it's probably me. I probably have the most conflicts of anyone else because I'm involved in so many businesses. So I think it's really, as David John says, we list out our conflicts in the statement that we send into the. I think there's a commission that asks us for all of our conflicts. But what we normally do is it's on a small island like Guam. It's unavoidable to have conflicts. If you want qualified people to serve on boards, unfortunately, you're gonna run into situations where there are going to be conflicts, and it's really up to the character of the person just to state there's a conflict and then to recuse him or herself when the situation arises. And what David just said is, Chairman John just said is very, very accurate. Just because you have a conflict doesn't mean you don't have a position on something. So you can have your position known, but when it comes to voting, then you step aside and you can't vote on it. So you still have the influence of speaking during a board meeting on your opinion on something that you have a conflict of interest, so you can still influence. So you're still allowed to speak even if you have a conflict of interest? Usually you don't, but there's nothing against you not speaking out. So that's an area that we usually leave up to our legal counsel to decide. You state your conflict and whether or not you're able to, and then legal counsel will let you know whether you can say something or not.
Oh, could I go ahead, Melody? Come on up. I was just about to ask if you could chime in on what happens in that circumstances.
I do believe that the relationship between board members and the executive or the management team at GITA is very circular in that they often advocate for us, but we also advocate for them. When it comes to conflicts of interest, as Director Chu mentioned, they're inevitable, especially when you want good people to serve, and which is what we have here. One of the things that in this administration that we've done is we've set up a pretty robust subcommittee structure, wherein we have subcommittees with a chair, free from conflicts, serving as the leader of this specific initiative. That subcommittee chair then sets the tone, sets the direction for how the direction of this specific initiative should go. They then report to the board, and if there's any call for a vote, then voting takes place. At which point in time, our legal counsel is always present. If there's any apparent conflicts of interest, oftentimes what will happen is my deputy or myself will go to the legal counsel and say, could this present a conflict of interest for Director A or Director B? And if that's the case, if the conflict is directly with the board chair, then we will go to the vice chair to ask how they'd like to handle it. And if it's with any other member, then we go to the chair and ask him how he'd like to handle it. So I think we put together a pretty good controls mechanism to protect both the board members as well as the GITA, the agency itself.
Who's your attorney? GITA's attorney?
We have Terry Brooks and Georgette Conception.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And you're right. One thing true to form is it's hard to find good people to sit on this board that has the knowledge and expertise in certain fields like this, especially growing our economy. And I know you two gentlemen have done just that in your own right and done it very well, by the way. I wanted to make that clear. There is something else. One last question. And Melody, don't forget October 16th, 8 a.m. Okay, we'll get together after this. The military buildup. Okay, GIDA's role in the military buildup with regards to whether it's data or land, what's happening with the dry dock, can you tell me a little bit about what your role as far as chairman and a board member when it comes to the military buildup?
Very limited. We really have not been called to act in any way directly in that. But the one indirect way is the H-2B situation, in making sure that we have the workers. Because right now what you have is it's a zero-sum economic situation at any one point in time based on equipment and personnel that's on the ground. The private sector is getting priced out right now of the workers, and so we're not able to get the work done outside the fence, and so we're trying to help with the H-2B issue. But inside the fence work, as far as anything in that end, we really haven't been involved with anything.
I used to be at GIDA, and one of the areas that I worked in, which I found GIDA to have a wealth of knowledge on, was the land, government land, what belongs to the government, and also the presumption of what the federal government owns as well. GIDA has a lot of data on the construction coming into the island, knowing what we're looking at as far as revenue, as far as taxes are concerned, GRTs being paid by these companies that have been awarded. This is good information and data, and it all pertains to the military buildup, but I'd like to see more stuff coming from GIDA with regards to information on the military buildup, whether it be, GRTs, land, or anything else that pertains to the military build, HB workers that you're advocating for. Well, one of the most important things, I had the opportunity when I was in Washington, D.C. to sit down with the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Lucian Niemeyer, and I explained to him how Guam has this, the 4 pillars, and part of it is the net negative. Well, how can you measure property on a net negative if you don't even know how much land you own? So government of Guam really does not know how much property they own, as well as there is a conflict between the federal government saying they own a certain amount of land and GIDA's information about owning a certain land parcel. So I'm hoping that GIDA stays on top of this to find out, and according to the Secretary of Navy, he said, feel free to call the Admiral, and ask them, what is your final amount of property that's owned by the federal government? And you'll find that these numbers are off. So hopefully GIDA will get more involved with this military buildup, and stay on tune with that, provide us data that we need. Okay?
Okay.
George? I got your support on that?
Yes.
I think that's a winner.
Okay, thank you so much.
We definitely we support economic development. So whether it's the private sector, the military, we definitely would support that.
Well, we probably have land we don't even know we have.
To that point,
And GIDA can take it and rent it and make some money.
To that point, Senator, there was something I was looking at last year, and I shared it with Mel and her team. But it's the I'm having trouble with my words this morning. Sri Lanka, the New Zealand model. I'm sorry, I think I've been hit with too many hockey pucks. It's a New Zealand model, and what they did after the financial crisis is they realized that they had all this abundance of land, and it wasn't being utilized correctly. It was just sitting still. It wasn't being used for the benefit of the community. And so what they did was they charged themselves with taking a look at the land differently, and the land and the assets that the government owns. They would quit using the term government owned and use the term taxpayer owned. And us as stewards of the government, we should be charged with getting the best return for the taxpayers. Now, it doesn't always have to be money, right? It could be best community services, you have the best parks, whatever you're going to do with that land. But be thinking, what's the best return on equity? And again, in government being equity, it's not always money, but whatever we define as equity, what's the best return on equity that we can get for each parcel of land? And I don't think we've done a very good job of that as a government as a whole. GIDA included, everybody. But with having land where we can only lease it out for 5 years without having to go through this layer and this layer and this layer, I don't think that's the best return for the taxpayer. And so, to your point, I think that you're right on, and we'd love to get involved with that. From our end of it, our initial one is to get involved with you in trying to shape how it would work, where you would still have your controls. We're not trying to ask for control to be taken away, but put controls in place that would allow for us to help get the best investment for our taxpayers.
I greatly appreciate that. Well, if Gita can find $4.9 million on something that was supposed to be paid for a long time ago, I'm sure Gita can find some property that actually belongs to the government and not the federal government. Okay? Thank you so much again, gentlemen, for your time.
Thanks.
George, good luck to you as well, and David.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tadegui. All right, Mr. John and Mr. Chu, I'll kind of pose this question to both of you. And so there's been some, reports about Gita operating at a loss for the last 3 fiscal years, I believe. What's the operating loss ending for September 30th, 2019? And how are you guys dealing with these losses?
The big piece on that we've talked about is there's only so much that we can control on the top line based on, if we're looking at the net of the agency, there's only so much we can do as far as the top line without changing our revenue streams. We're actually reduced our spending over the last couple of years. We've been focusing on what we can do internally, but we're not going to reduce our spending to get out of this fiscal situation we're in. We need to increase our revenue streams. And right now we get our revenues from taking pieces of, we get paid from when bonds are issued, only when they're issued. We get paid from rents, from leases. We get paid from grants, and we get paid through community contributions. Last year's shortfall was almost dollar for dollar in what was taken away from us on the community contribution. I know from a headline in the newspaper that we don't want to hear, Gita is taking money from the community contribution, like we're doing something behind closed doors and taking money from community contributions. But that's how we are set up to have income. Our income under our current structure is real estate, like I said, real estate, and in there we're hemmed in because it's very difficult to lease that real estate out. And I think that we haven't advocated this. I'm not blaming anybody but us on that. We need to advocate how we can get more money out of the leases. We're restricted there. The community contributions are the second piece of it. And I don't think that's a very healthy structure. It's by having us do that, we're actually setting tax policy because we're working with the QC recipient and saying, give us this much in community contribution, and we're taking a piece of it. I'd rather see us take less community contribution, assign it out to it, where I think you're going with Senator, regarding setting it aside for like medical, for a hospital, and whatever would kind of tie into the industry of the group, and have it more in that contractual form, and not getting that revenue, but then getting a revenue source from somewhere else so that we can do our work. And so we are working on that to try to lift the top line dollar. And we have some ideas. We want to share it with you. But the grant issue is something that's a laggard. That was one thing we really want to focus on. So we're pushing out, trying to get the grants. We finished the SEDS project, which was sitting there for years. The Calvo administration got it right up to the finish line, and then we brought it over the finish line. So we've got the SEDS program up in place so that we can qualify for these federal grants now. But now it takes time to see if we're actually going to receive them, so there's a little bit of a laggard there. But we want to focus more on grants, we want to focus more on real estate, and then we want to find a different revenue source, and we're not quite sure what that would be, but we'd like to come talk with you and figure out what could be, so that we're not getting involved with the community contributions as such. So right now, based on the structure, it kind of limits what we're doing, but we're trying to think outside the box and come up with some better solutions so that we can raise the top line. We have been very cognitive on the bottom line, and we've reduced the spending on that. And our board's very cognitive of it. You don't see us traveling around. Director Chu and I are examples. We've taken numerous trips over the years, and I don't think I maybe have turned in reimbursements for 3 or 4 trips in 10 years. The rest of them we do on my own, same with Director Chu. So we're very cognitive on the cost side of it, the expense side of it, and we want to figure different ways to raise the revenue side of it up. and something more healthy. I don't think it's healthy that we're getting paid only when we're issuing debt. As a taxpayer, I'd love no debt. So we would like to have it structured where the agencies that are utilizing our resources there would just pay us annually, for our resources. And then if we go out and issue bonds, we're not getting paid more or less based on activity in the bond markets. And then when it comes to community contributions, I'm not comfortable setting tax policy, which is what we're in right now. It'd be better if there was just a revenue stream that we would get to oversee that piece of it also. So we'd like to kind of think outside the box on that one and bring you some ideas. And the team has been tasked with it. And right now we're trying to focus on how much grant revenue that we could receive, so then we could kind of work the numbers backwards from there to what we would need. But there's a little bit of a lag time in that because we don't know if we're going to receive the grants or not.
Mr. Chu?
As our Chairman John stated, we're probably the only unfunded government Guam agency, so we have to go out there and think outside the box and look for our own revenues. Unfortunately, some of our good revenue streams was taken away from us from the past administration. I think Senator Tydegui mentioned the shipyard. We used to have that revenue stream, and that was a very good one. And then all of a sudden, they decided that wasn't GITA land anymore. So I don't know who made the decision, but that was one source of revenue stream that during the past 8 years when we were sitting on the board was just literally taken away from us. We had another revenue stream that was available to us, and unfortunately, there was a decision made by the previous administration to sell the property instead of keep the rental stream coming into GITA. Once you sell the property, it goes back into the loan pool, and that we have no access to that for our operating funds anymore. So a lot of it is due to a lot of the limitations were not by our choice, so to speak. It was decisions made that was out of our hands that took away our revenue stream. And then meanwhile, we continue to look at various ways to try to lease out what other properties we have. The QC is another area that we had revenue streams coming on, and I think Senator Terlahi asked, is there a moratorium on QC? I really don't know if there's a moratorium or not. All I know is that people are not coming in to apply for QCs. And I think that's a really misconception on the part of the public here on Guam, that we're just giving away our money when we give out these QCs, but it's really not true. Take for example the hotel QC. When you build a hotel and you get a QC, you think you're giving all these tax breaks. Okay, you're really enticing the person to come in to invest, but the benefits of the QC doesn't really accrue to the QC holder until it almost expires, so to speak. When you first build that hotel and you're giving them an income tax credit, a rebate, and basically they don't get to take advantage of it because they're not making money probably the first 7-8 years while they're holding this QC. So there's no advantage to the QC, and everybody thinks that we're giving this tax dollars away. You're really not giving anything away, but it's more of an enticement. So without that, I think we're looking at other ways, and hopefully we can find ways to cover up the deficit.
Thanks. So you guys are talking a lot about finding ways to increase revenues, but what other ways can we cut some expenditures? Is there any chance of, I know there's been talk in the past about, currently you're a tenant of the ITC building, and there's been some talk, I believe, about perhaps moving out of the ITC building. What about the Tropicolor building that's next door to FHP? Isn't that your guys' building? And is that something you guys could move into and save money on rent?
We leased, I believe the Tropicana building is under lease. It's just the group that leased it out hasn't been developing it. We put out the lease, to the RFP process to, which is why we're in the ITC building. We brought in other groups to augment our rent. We brought in the Hagatni Restoration Authority is now in there with us. So we're looking to how we can sublet some of the space out. The rate per square foot, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's it's at market rates or below. It was a good rate dollar amount. I think our footprint's bigger than what it needs to be, so we've been looking to find ways to share that. And over the long run, you know, when the new lease comes up, you know, you could maybe look at doing different things. But we've really, we've cut expenses back and back and back, and we're not going to, you know, we don't see ourselves being a beneficial agency if that's all we're focusing on. You know, just if we're really going to work on developing the economy, I don't think we should have a shoestring budget. I'm not saying we should be living in a marble palace, but I think we need to have a proper revenue stream, and we're the ones that need to be blamed for this, and we need to come up with a better structure and come to you with our ideas and have, you know, you help us shape it. So that, you know, this is on us, but we've been limited in some of the things that have gone on in the last few years, and revenue sources have been taken away from us that we need to adjust for. So there are some things we can do on the expense side, but I don't see I don't think things that would sit here and we get applauded for. We've really focused on that, keeping expenses down.
You mentioned, one of you mentioned that some property was sold. What property is that?
Well, the first, the shipyard was given back, and then the second, there was land in Tumooning where the Cost You Less building is. Half of that strip used to belong to the government. It was taken back in a note. It was collateralization of a note back in, I want to say, the early 2000s. The loan went into default. GITA took the land back, but it, you know, wasn't I don't know what the right terminology was, but it wasn't traditionally Gov Guam land, and so the idea was that now that the note had been paid off.
So was land GITA acquired
Through that, so it was put back
default on a loan?
So it was put back in the marketplace and sold at a pretty good return on the investment. But we lost the income stream because it went back into the loan fund. It wasn't something where we could hold on to it and invest it and then capture the interest.
So the
because it was
proceeds
used
from the sale.
Yeah, it was a collateralized loan asset, and so it went back into the loan fund. And so we now have more money to lend out. But to Director Chu's point, we haven't been doing a lot of lending because, you know, it requires the bank turn downs before we could do anything.
Is there a reason why it was sold rather than leased?
It's just that it was not a term. I'm not using the right term, but it wasn't it wasn't traditionally government asset, right? It was private sector assets, and so it was to get the money back. It was basically I think the prior administration wanted to get the land back into the private sector because that's what it was over the long term. It was a private sector land. But it was put out for sale, and it was sold at a good return up for GITA. It's just that we weren't able to capture the return for operations. It went into the loan fund. So the loan fund is stronger for it, right? Because the money that's in there isn't supposed to be sitting as a piece of land. It's supposed to be liquid assets that could be lent out, and in the land form it wasn't. So I guess GITA could have bid against, you know, whoever was bidding against it and tried to. But for one reason or another, that piece was sold out, so we lost the income stream on it.
Okay. And then the Tropicolor building, you mentioned that there's a current lease right now with the
Yes.
Tropicolor building?
Yes.
And so what's the status of that? It's just...
Yeah, the group that owns it has looked at doing different projects on it, but they haven't gone forward. They're current. They've been paying their lease.
is that at market value, that lease?
That one is, I believe, because that came through in the last 8 years. We've been really focused on that. You know, the leases that are old, they go back into the 70s. At the time, they made sense dollar-wise, but they didn't have proper adjustments on them, right? So they weren't bad leases. They didn't have the proper pieces on them at the time, and so they're below market now. But we've held the line for all situations, I believe. I'm not aware of any where we didn't hold the line for market. We've killed deals because that's not the right thing to do.
That's good. That's good to hear. So, are you guys satisfied with the current organizational structure of GITA? Have you ever considered reorganizing it in any way to match up more with the administration's platform or the administration's goals?
Yeah, you want to?
It
was redone.
This
Yeah.
department,
Yeah.
so we consolidated into fewer departments.
Yeah, we recently, I don't know if you, are you, the SEDS project that was out there, and maybe it'd be a good point to touch on the SEDS really quick. We've been working to consolidate where we can, and so we actually have just gone through this. We eliminated our SEDS division and folded those people into public finance that were still around. And then what we've done with the SEDS project, so it doesn't become this huge project every 6-7 years, is we call it a living document now. And so we want to update that every year. And so that we can keep that thing in place so that we don't get behind on the ability to go after these federal grants. So not make it such a big grandiose thing where you got to bring in extra personnel and economists to do this. Let's just keep the data current. And then we've already gone with that with the SEDS piece of it, where we've gone out for helping with the apprentice type programs in one industry. We were talking, and then it was brought up, and another industry came along. Hey, can we be included in that? So as we update the SEDS documents, we want it to become a living document. But we've eliminated personnel because we're going to keep continuing to update that and not make it such a grand scheme. But yeah, we recently have done that.
Just to add on that SEDS document, I think that's probably one of the best achievements that GITA has done. This allows access. Anything that's in that SEDS document, it's allowed access to about $170 million of grant money that's available. I know that University of Guam is taking advantage of that immediately. They saw that window of opportunity. So I think we need to go out there, and that's really going to help promote Guam. If you can get the grant, whatever in the says there, you can apply for a grant, and basically it's 80% covered. You only have to come up with 20%, and it's just a fantastic program because we were able to get the SEDS completed. We basically opened up Guam to have the ability on a first come first served basis to have grant money, access to about $170 million of grant money. So people should take a look at that SEDS program. I encourage any institution to take a look at the SEDS, what's in the SEDS and what's available in the program, and write that grant, because it is on a first come first served basis. Thank you.
Thanks. I just have one question left for the both of you. Both of you served on the GITA board for several years now. After you've had this opportunity to be on the board for this many years, what are your main priorities? What are the major concerns you guys have that you'd like to find solutions to, or what are your priorities? Mr. Chu?
Well, I think our pet peeve have been the lack of funding. So the first thing that we need to find a solution to, which you've already pointed out, is we need to find funding for GITA. I mean, I think the board has gone, not just ourselves, the two of us here, but all the board members. There's a stipend that's supposed to be paid to us. We've even forego that to be able to help out in wherever we can as far as the budget's concerned. But I think I mentioned earlier the key area that we need, what I would look at right now is we have roughly about $12 million in seed money. How can we make that available and loan it out in the manner that we can actually collect it back with interest, not just loan it out for the sake of loaning it out, which back when I was growing up in Guam, GITA had a tendency to do. I mean, you read about all these crazy projects that GITA lend money to, movies, airlines, or whatever. So we don't want to throw away the money. We have $12 million there, so we want to. Being business people, I guess we're automatically leery when you come to us for a loan after you've been rejected by 3 banks, right? You're not exactly a good credit risk. So sometimes, your guard goes up immediately. It's like, okay, why is this guy's only coming to us because he can't get a loan from 3 other banks? That's pretty. Now they're coming. So we don't want to be the lender of last resort, so to speak, but we want to be able to use that seed money for projects that will basically loan out money, will collect interest, that will be able to generate operating funds for us. That interest income we can use, and then that will be a revenue source that we generate on our own and be able to overcome the deficit. Thank you.
Thank you.
On that point, yeah, so the revenue for certain will be coming to you with ideas there. Director Chu's got one other idea he's been very creative on with the loan fund, is to find, is there a way that we could actually become equity participants for a period of time for startups? And so maybe get around doing and that's Director Chu's idea. He's very humble. But to come up with ideas of how we could use that money. So the legal team's working on what options would be available there for that. Because to get to the point of having to get turned down by 3 banks, there might be a problem there, right? But if we could come into somebody, a young, not necessarily young, but a new entrepreneur who maybe didn't have the track record, the collateral, how can we come in as a collateralization partner, and then how do we get out of it, right? We don't want to necessarily be involved with it forever, but I don't know if it would be a preferred stock or whatever else there. But we're looking at ideas there, which I think is a great idea. From my standpoint also, I'd like to find a way to make the agency help the agency become more of a diamond in the rough for the community, where we can, for example, when we looked over the QC program and trying to find how to make it work better, instead of having one grandiose QC program, make it industry specific, make it so that we quantify what the benefit potential is that we're giving away, and also have it, there's a sunset in there. So every few years we have to come back to the legislature and say, hey, do we still want this? So it's just not something that becomes its own beast, but it's more refined and it's more in line with what the legislature's vision is and what the administration at the time's vision is and the community as a whole. So maybe tying some of those things down and making those things more attractive, and to get a stronger revenue source in for us to be actually going out and developing. Helping bring in investors. We don't really have much of a budget for that right now. So how do we come up with something that's a stronger budget there? And then again, on the public debt side of things, changing how we're paid. So instead of getting paid per obligation, just have a consistent revenue source so that it will allow us to focus on what we're doing there. Consistent with what we're doing right now in moving to the next stage with it, but the income side of it, and then if we could be more involved with what Director Chu's talking about, I think it could be a big thing.
All right. Thank you, Mr. John. And I'm definitely looking forward to hearing some of those ideas. I think those are some good ideas you're presenting. I'm looking forward to working with you more on those ideas and developing those ideas and seeing how we can help improve your financial condition. So with that, I want to thank both of you for your participation and congratulate both of you on your reappointments to the board.
Thank you.
This will end the hearing. The committee will continue to accept written statements on today's, unless my colleagues have any further questions they would like to, okay. The committee will continue to accept written statements on today's hearing within 5 business days from today, which may be delivered to my office at 238 Archbishop Flores Street, Suite 906 of the DNA Building in Hagåtña. Statements can also be submitted via email to sen.cridgell@teleguam.net, or you may send it via fax to 475-4768. The hearing is now adjourned, and it is 10:14 a.m. Thank you.